everyone, and welcome back. I'm Cynthia and I'm in my quilt lab today working on the Illusion Sampler, a Scrappy version of month number 3. I hope you had a chance to check out the other videos. Both 1 and 2 are on my playlist, so go and check them out so you can see what I did with those 2 lovely months. And this is number 3. So let's get started and talk about what I have here. The pattern is split up into 3 parts: a main block, 2 accent parts, and then a putting it together section. So what I have here in front of me is about the main block. It's a 12.5 by 12.5 unfinished block. You can see I have a bunch of background 2 squares, and I have a bunch of squares from 1 through 9 fabrics, and I'm also going to be using some fusible web product because we're going to be doing some applique again this month. That's right. This month we are using the Drunkard's Path, and instead of the traditional piece Drunkard's Path, we're doing an applique version. So let's get started. Okay, so according to directions, we're going to be using the Drunkard's Path template that comes in the instructions, and we're going to be tracing it on the paper side of the fusible web squares. Now it has us cut out squares the same size as each of the 1 through 9s, and then you trace the pattern onto the squares, adhere it to the colored square patches, cut them out, and then applique it to the background. I'm going to do things just a little bit different. I don't have a whole lot of my fusible product, so what I'm going to do is I've already traced one of them and cut it out, and I'm going to use this as a template and then make 8 more, and I'm going to try to fill up this sheet of fusible as much as I possibly can so that I can get the best bang for my buck out of this fusible web. Then I'll roughly cut them out, put them on the back of these lovelies over here, give them a light press, and then we'll take them to those backgrounds. So let me cut out some templates, do some pressing, and I'll be right back. So here's the 9 Drunkard's Path templates. I have the fusible web on the back side of them. So what I'm going to be doing next is peeling off the other side and attaching them to the background. So let's just do one really quickly here so you can see what it's like. The product that I'm using, Steam to Steam, just has me do a quick press for the one side and then another press to completely adhere it. And the reason I like the Steam to Steam is that it's a little tacky, so it's a little sticky already, but not so sticky that I can't pick it up like I just did and replace it the way I need to so that it stays nice flat. In fact, there's a little thread right there that I don't like, so I'm going to unpeel it again and take out that little piece of thread. Alright, so I'm going to do this to all of them and then give them a good press so that is permanently adhered to the background. And then the instructions have us do an applique stitch along the curved side of the Drunkard's Path. It says to pick your favorite stitch, and you can do a blanket stitch, you can do a zigzag, or if you have another favorite decorative stitch on your machine, now's the time to break it out. The sample used a blanket stitch with the width of 2.0 and a length of 3.0. It doesn't tell you what type of thread to use, so you can also decide what type of thread you use. I'm going to probably pick a background color here since that's what I did on a previous applique. And I'll use that light purple with all of them. All right, let me do this and I'll be right back with the next step. All right, I have applique stitched all of my little curves from these Drunkard Paths. It says to lay out the Drunkard Path units as shown, and this is what it looks like in the directions: purple, red, orange, light teal or turquoise, blue, dark turquoise, yellow, green, and that violet color. it doesn't, I mean, this is your quilt, so you can change it up, and that's what I'm going to do right now. The only reason is because I have 3 plain fabrics next to a bunch of prints. So I'm actually just going to switch these two. That way I don't have 2 plain fabrics sitting next to each other. It's the only reason I'm switching. You can switch them around as much as you want. It's your quilt after all. And we're going to move on to piecing these together. So it says to piece them in rows first, and then put the rows into columns. So I'm going to piece each. When I piece these, I'm going to press the top and that bottom row towards the right, and that middle row the opposite way towards the left. That way, when the 3 rows are ready to be pieced together, the seams will all nest very nicely. So let me go do that, and I'll come back and talk about the pressing once the block is finished. Okay, so here are the 3 rows. You can see that I pressed the top and the bottom to the right and that middle one to the left, so that when we go to sew them, they'll all nest together. So I'm going to put pins in those and sew these 3 rows together. When they're finished, I'm going to press up towards that top of the block. So let me do that and I'll be right back. All right, there is the finished 12.5-inch block, or 12-inch block. I'm just going to point out that I pressed everything to the top, but guys, this is you have all that fusible in there, so it's a little thick in these corners. I may have made a different decision and pressed all the seams open so that it would lay a little flatter, because this is a little bit of a bulkiness right here in the corners. But I followed all the directions to stay true to Scott's design so that everybody can see what it looks like. I also did a nice best press on this so that it would stay nice and flat, just because that is a lot of bulk with that fusible behind it. There is an alternate version to the drunkard's path. There's a pieced version, so you don't have to do the applique version. If you're comfortable sewing seams and piecing the drunkard's path, there is the option and template to do those. And I'll make a separate video just to show that process as well. I'm just following the month as it goes. And so this one's done. Let's move on to those accent strips. All right, so the cutting instructions for these accent strips, we're going to have some background 2 rectangles, some background 4 squares, 5 of them, from fabrics 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 9. We're going to do a total of 6. So please pay attention to those. You're not making 6 of each, you're making a total of 6. And since that's 6 fabrics, it's actually 1 of each. And then from 1, 2, 3, 5, and 9, we're going to make a total of 5 squares. Again, it's 1 of each of those fabrics, not 5 from each of those fabrics. It's a little clarification there in the instructions. So those are the piece lists. Let's move on to the instructions. All right, grab those background 4 squares. We're going to be making a diagonal line across the middle of them. This is a good opportunity to grab your little 1/4 inch ruler if you want, or just a plain ruler is fine. I'm just going to put this on the diagonal, and I'm just going to draw that center line. If I wanted to, I can go ahead and draw that other side too, and I'll show you why. We're going to take all these squares and we're going to pair them off with the 5 different colors, the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 9. Put these on top, and we're going to stitch on that center diagonal line. Once we have that, the reason I put that other line there is because that's where I'm going to cut off this extra, because we're going to, once the stitch is done, it's going to be folded open and be a cute little half square triangle. So I'm going to do that with the 5 squares, come back, and we're going to square these up and move on. I'll be right back. Okay, so I've stitched that center seam, and here's where that other pencil line comes in handy. Not that you have to use that. It just gives you an extra kind of line to use your ruler to make sure you cut off that extra. So let's cut that extra off. You're then going to press this open towards the dark side. And I'll just give this one a little finger press so you see what that looks like. Pretty little half square triangle. And do that with all of the others. And we're ready to move on to the next step, which is sewing these together. So this is the layout that the instructions give for the half square triangles. We're going to set aside that red one for right now because it'll be used in the future. The next layout is the light turquoise, yellow, violet, and orange. We're going to seam these together, and we're going to press towards the left, towards that big triangle. I'm going to do that, and we'll be right back and move on to the next step. All right, there's my finished half square triangle unit. See that I pressed everything towards that left. So I'm going to grab these two, and we're going to move on to the second accent strip. So grab all those little rectangles, both from the background 2 and from the 6 different colors, and arrange them according to what you see in the instructions, which looks a little like this. All right, so the layout looks a little something like this. My camera's not quite wide enough to lay them all out nice and flat. So you can consider them sort of like the little squares. We've seen the square accents for all the strips, so square, 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 square. So we're going to piece all of these together. We're going to sew, after we sew them, we're going to press them all to the left, except for the one between the green and the background, because that's going to be where the next accent strip lines up against, and we'll want to keep that going the opposite way so that it'll nest nicely when we pin that together. So pay close attention to that pressing line, because that one is different compared to the rest of them. All right, I'm going to seam these all together, and we'll be right back. Okay, so there's the finished strip. Let me just turn it over so you can see the pressing. You'll notice all of them are pressing towards the right except for that one that we're pressing towards the left so that it nests up later. Okay, that's our second accent strip. It's finished. So let's move on to the blocking and putting it all together. All right, so grab all your pieces and follow the cutting instructions for the block assembly. By this time, it should be pretty familiar. You have a couple small strips, a couple little longer, and then 2 bigger ones and a square. Should be pretty familiar. In fact, this layout should seem very familiar. So let's get started. Let's grab that 12-inch block. It's, of course, going up here. Grab your half square triangles, and that orange part is going to be up near the top, and that single one It's going to be down near the bottom. And that other accent strip, let me turn this around. It's going to be next to it, right there. And then we just fill in with the rest of the pieces. So grab your sashings. The square goes in the corner, and the two big ones go on the side and the bottom. Like I said before, this layout should seem pretty familiar by now. This is month 3, and it's the exact same instructions. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with that big square. We're going to do the sashing around it. Once again, pressing out away from that block. Move over here to the right, and we'll do this accent strip with the background. Press towards the background. Once those two pieces are done, you're ready to put them together, and you're going to press towards that background again. Then we're moving to the bottom. Piece that absolute bottom row first. Press out away from that half square triangle, and then attach the bottom row to the second accent strip. Remember, that's why we did that different pressing on that side, so that they nest up together. Top part is done, bottom part is done. So when all we have to do is do that one last seam, and month 3 will be finished. All right, let me take this to the sewing machine, and we'll be finished with month number 3 in just a moment. There we go. That's the finish of month 3 for the Illusion Sampler, my Scrappy version. Let me just flip it over so you can take a look at the back. There we go. Pause it to take a look at all my pressing. All right. Like I said, this is month 3 of a 12-month block of the month program. I hope you stick around for the next 9 months and see what I do with the rest. If you haven't checked out those first few videos, please head to my channel. If you liked what you saw, please give me that big old thumbs up. I appreciate it. And be sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can see month 4 through 12. Can't wait to see you around here next time. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you'd like to see any other videos from me in the future. And I hope to see you around again. Thanks for joining me in my quilt lab. This is Cynthia, signing off.